Tenants, Mortgages, and Time. Tenants, Mortgages, and Time, Building Passive Income Through Residential Rental Properties. 90% of all millionaires become so through owning real estate. Andrew Carnegie. In 2003, I stood in the living room of a four-plex in Chicago's Lincoln Square neighborhood and did some math on a napkin. The building had fire damage. Drug dealers had lived there before I arrived. It had been vacant for months. My father had lent me the 10% down payment. What I saw past all of that, 4 units, 4 income streams, 1 mortgage, and a neighborhood 2 blocks from the subway in a city where people desperately needed places to live. I bought it. I renovated it. I leased all 4 units within a few weeks. 11 months later, I sold it for a profit of $140,000, nearly double my annual salary at the time. That transaction changed the way I thought about money forever. Not because $140,000 is a life-altering sum, though it felt that way at the time, but because I had earned it through ownership rather than employment. The building had done the work. I had provided the capital and the judgment. And that distinction between income that requires your presence and income that does not is the whole point of this chapter. Why passive income is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." That verse has always haunted me a little, not because it sets an impossible standard, but because it describes a kind of wealth that compounds across generations, and most of the people I know are moving in exactly the opposite direction. The difference between wealth that grows and wealth that stagnates often comes down to a single question. Are you only working, or is your money also working for you? Earned income, the salary, the hourly wage, the consulting fee, stops the moment you stop. It cannot work while you sleep. It cannot send your children to college the year after you die. It cannot outlive you. Passive income can. Residential rental properties are not the only vehicle for passive income, but they are among the most accessible, most tangible, and most powerful. Unlike a stock portfolio, a rental property is something you can drive past. Unlike a dividend payment, a rent check represents a real family sleeping under a real roof that you own. And unlike a savings account, a rental property does something remarkable. It appreciates in value while someone else pays down your debt. 7 reasons. Passive income changes everything. Financial freedom. When your investments earn more than you spend, work becomes optional. Warren Buffett said it plainly. If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Retirement security. Passive income does not retire when you do. A rental property that generates cash flow at 65 will still be generating cash flow at 85. Tax advantages. Rental income is among the most favorably taxed income in the entire tax code. Depreciation alone can shelter tens of thousands of dollars from taxation every year. Flexibility. Passive income buys back your most irreplaceable asset, time. Resilience. A layoff, a recession, or a health crisis can destroy earned income overnight. A diversified base of passive income streams provides a buffer that no employer can eliminate. Diversification. A rental property moves to its own rhythm, often out of step with the stock market. Generational wealth. A paid-off rental property, passed to your children with a stepped-up cost basis, transfers wealth with virtually no tax consequence. The simple geometry of rental real estate. At its core, residential rental real estate is a straightforward transaction. You buy a property. A tenant pays you rent. If you have a mortgage, the rent covers the payment and then some. Over 30 years, your tenant pays off the loan. At the end, you own a property outright, worth several times what you paid for it, and the rent check is now nearly pure income. Let's put real numbers to it, because the math here is worth understanding in concrete terms. Suppose you purchase a $300,000 single-family home with a 20% down payment of $60,000. On a 30-year fixed mortgage at 4%, your principal and interest payment runs approximately $1,145 per month. Now add the other carrying costs. Property tax runs around $600 per month. Insurance adds another $100. and a miscellaneous buffer for vacancy and repairs, the small things that inevitably come up with any property, adds another $100. Add it all together, and your total monthly cost to own this property is $1,945. Your tenant pays $1,945 or more. You break even, or better. And here is where it gets interesting. Thanks to depreciation, the tax deduction the IRS allows rental property owners to claim each year, you owe little to nothing in taxes on that rental income. You are collecting cash, covering your costs, and sheltering the income from taxation all at the same time. Now let's look at what 30 years does to that picture. Real estate has historically appreciated at roughly 4% per year on average. At that rate, a $300,000 home purchased today is worth approximately $976,000 after 30 years. Meanwhile, your tenant has been paying down your mortgage the entire time. By the end of year 30, the loan is gone. You own the property free and clear. Your $60,000 down payment has become roughly $973,000 in net equity. That is a return of 1,527% on the money you actually put in. Let that number sink in for a moment. Not a 1,527% return on $300,000, on $60,000, because you didn't have to invest the full purchase price. You put in 20%, and the bank funded the rest. That is the power of leverage, the ability to control a large asset with a small amount of your own capital. You did not invest $300,000 and watch it grow to $976,000. You invested $60,000, let the bank's $240,000 do the heavy lifting alongside your own dollars, and let your tenant's monthly rent cover the entire cost of ownership along the way. No other common investment combines these elements the way real estate does. Someone else pays down your debt, the asset appreciates over time, the income is sheltered from taxes, and your return is calculated not on the full value of the asset, but only on what you personally put in. That combination is what makes residential rental property one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to ordinary investors. Leverage is the closest thing to a financial superpower. Naval Ravikant. Now consider what happens after the mortgage is retired. The rent has risen over 30 years along with everything else. A property that commanded $1,945 per month at the outset might reasonably command $5,800 per month 3 decades later. Your expenses have also risen to perhaps $2,400 per month. The result? $3,400 per month in pure cash flow. That is $40,800 per year, generated by an asset you own free and clear that someone else paid down, that you can pass to your heirs with a stepped-up basis, from one property. The right rental property does 3 things simultaneously. It appreciates in value, generates current income, and shelters that income from taxes. There is no other common investment that accomplishes all 3. 8 lessons from the School of Hard Knocks. Lesson 1. Research before you risk. My first properties, that fire-damaged four-plex in Lincoln Square, taught me that the key to a good investment is understanding your purchase price relative to the market before you buy. I walked every block within a quarter mile. I checked crime rates. I researched comparable rentals. I noticed that the sellers were motivated and the vacancy was a negotiating advantage, not a warning sign. I believe I bought at a discount of $50,000 to $80,000 below market value. The lesson? Overpaying at the outset compresses your returns for the entire life of the investment. Price discipline at purchase is the single most powerful return-enhancing decision you will make. Lesson 2. What you learn in the game, you cannot learn outside it. After I sold that Chicago fourplex, my realtor introduced me to the 1031 Starker Exchange, a provision in the tax code that allows you to defer capital gains taxes on an investment property sale by rolling the proceeds into a like-kind investment within 180 days. I had never heard of it. I only learned about it because I was in the transaction. I used that first exchange to acquire 3 properties simultaneously in Dallas, 2 model homes in the Stonebridge Ranch community in McKinney, purchased as leaseback deals with the builder, and one townhome near uptown Dallas. That single transaction, funded by deferred gains, effectively tripled my portfolio without triggering a tax bill. Lesson 3. Pursue the deal that seems impossible. When I needed to deploy the proceeds of my 1031 exchange quickly, I was working without a Texas real estate license and against a 45-day identification window. I found a realtor who did not just show me properties, she educated me. Through her, I discovered leaseback arrangements, purchasing a model home from a builder who then leases it back from you, often covering property taxes, insurance, and HOA fees as part of the arrangement. The builder needed liquidity. I needed yield with minimal management. Both parties won. Lesson 4. Help others and you learn more. My parents had been struggling to sell a commercial lot in Irving for over a decade. I searched the commercial listings in the area and found an agent who was thriving where others had failed. I called her. She sold the property in a month at near market price. My parents were so moved by the outcome that they used the proceeds to do something that still means everything to me. They funded my wife's engagement ring, our honeymoon, and the down payment on our first home. The principle, the deals you do for others sharpen the instincts you need for yourself. Lesson 5. Your real estate license pays for itself many times over. I once calculated that I had paid well over $100,000 in commissions to realtors over the course of my early investing. After getting my Texas license, I recaptured those savings deal by deal and earned commission on transactions I helped friends complete. The license is not just a credential, it is access to the MLS, to standard legal forms, to market data, and to a network of professionals who will treat you as a peer rather than a client. Lesson 6. The 2008 crash turned a problem into a strategy. When the real estate market collapsed in 2008 and 2009, flipping became nearly impossible. I had properties I could not sell at reasonable prices. Rather than accept losses, I converted them to rentals. That forced transition turned out to be one of the best financial decisions of my life. I read everything I could about landlording. I learned about vetting tenants, managing maintenance, and claiming depreciation. And I discovered that the rental income, reinvested systematically, gave me the capital to eventually pay off each property entirely. Lesson 7. Debt-free ownership is the end game. The interest rates available to me during my primary accumulation years were historically low, around 2.5%. Today's rates, hovering above 6%, make the early years more challenging. All the more reason to pursue the long game. Pay down the mortgage aggressively when you can, eliminate the debt, and convert your rental income from a modest cash flow business into a powerful, nearly expense-free income stream. My wife and I combined our incomes for years to save every dollar of rental income, using it along with investment proceeds to pay off our personal residence, then each rental property in turn. Some people think me foolish for this. After all, there is a 7.5% spread between my mortgage rate and the average annual return of the S&P 500. On paper, I was leaving money on the table. I understood the math. I made a different choice anyway. My decision was not based on a spreadsheet but on prayer. In one of my morning quiet times while studying the Bible, I came across Romans 13:8. Let no debt remain outstanding. During prayer, I felt convicted to be rid of all debt, including mortgage debt. So I began systematically diverting rental income and stock gains to pay off our properties one by one. What followed I can only describe as provision. Over several years, I liquidated a large position in Apple stock at its peak, and then, years later, did it again. The proceeds paid off our primary residence and rental properties until, within 5 years of that morning's conviction, I was entirely debt-free. I did not engineer that timing. I simply obeyed what I believed I had been called to do, and the resources arrived when they were needed. This is not a formula. It is a testimony. And the verse that began it seems the right one to close it. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. Matthew 6:33. Lesson 8. Sometimes you help someone else build their passive income. When my dad reached retirement age, I offered to manage his bills and finances so that he could have more time to enjoy his retirement with my mom. They agreed. I was following the command in Scripture, "Honor your father and mother," which is the first commandment with a promise, "so that it may go well with you," Ephesians 6:2-3. For the next 20 years, I invested their money, purchased and managed rental properties for them, and watched their net worth grow fivefold, by God's grace, not by my cleverness. My dad was making in retirement more than he ever earned while working. As great as the benefit to my parents, I believe I received the greater return in what I learned and the experience I gained. Never underestimate what you can gain by helping others. The practical art of landlording. The most important thing, find the right tenant. In real estate, the saying is location, location, location. For rental properties specifically, a close second is tenant, tenant, tenant. The right tenant pays on time, cares for the property, and leaves you alone. The wrong tenant costs you money, time, legal fees, and peace of mind. I have had good tenants, and I have had disasters. A tenant who paid her application fee and a wad of cash should have sent me running. A tenant with a prior eviction cost me months of lost rent and significant property damage. A pastor with poor credit, a man I wanted to believe the best about, abandoned the property mid-lease without notice. Here is what I now require, with rare exception: gross monthly income of at least 3 times the rent. Credit score of 700 or above. I advertise this threshold up front. No prior evictions. No disqualifying criminal history. Verifiable employment and income. Verifiable previous residence and rental history. I use a service like Rent Spree to conduct background, credit, eviction, and identity checks, all paid by the applicant as part of the application fee. And I meet every serious prospect in person. There is no substitute for looking someone in the eye. Rentspree.com. Vetting pitfalls to avoid. Never rush to fill a vacancy. A month of lost rent is cheaper than a year of a bad tenant. Apply the same criteria to every applicant. Inconsistency creates legal exposure. Do not ignore gut instincts. Tardiness, vague answers, and an incomplete application are all signals. Verify everything. One tenant I nearly placed had falsified her identity, her previous address, her employer, and her pay stubs. I discovered the fraud only by driving to the previous address and then the claimed workplace. Do not make exceptions for hardship stories. Sympathy is a virtue in the pew. In landlording, it is a financial liability. Listing and marketing. Hire a professional photographer. Services like homesnappers.com use wide-angle lenses that make spaces look their best. Most landlords skip this step. That is your advantage. Homesnappers.com. Write a comprehensive, detailed description. If you are including appliances, say so. If the neighborhood has excellent schools, mention it. List on the MLS, if you have a license, Zillow's rental portal, and apartments.com. Prepare the property for every showing. Temperature set comfortably, blinds open, all lights on, surfaces clean, no dead bugs or cobwebs, no deferred maintenance visible. Limiting your involvement over time. Payments. All rent is collected electronically. No checks, no cash, no trips to the bank. Repairs. I ask tenants to photograph the problem, find a well-reviewed local contractor, schedule the work, and submit an invoice. I don't set foot in the property unless I choose to. Leases. I use DocuSign for all lease signatures. Records. I maintain a simple Google spreadsheet tracking every expense and payment. This is a critical step to claim all the deductions you are due at tax time. Finding the right investment property, a step-by-step framework. Step 1. Define your goals and strategy. Before you look at a single property, answer these questions. What is your primary objective? How much capital can you deploy? What is your risk tolerance? Do you want a single-family home, multi-family building, or condo? Will you self-manage or hire a property manager? Will you pursue long-term leases or short-term rentals? Step 2. Choose your market carefully. Look for strong and growing job market, population growth, affordable home prices relative to local incomes, rising rents and low vacancy rates, good schools, proximity to amenities, transportation, and major employers. Step 3. Run the numbers. Calculate net operating income, NOI, gross rental income minus all operating expenses, property tax, insurance, HOA, leasing and management expenses, etc., excluding mortgage payments. Cash flow, NOI minus annual mortgage payments. You want this to be positive from day one. Step 4. Due diligence. Never skip the inspection. Also verify clear title, proper zoning for rental use, absence of rent control restrictions, and, if applicable, the HOA's rules and financial health. There is nothing so devastating as buying a rental property only to discover the HOA restricts new rentals. Steps 5 and 6. Close smart, start right. Make a data-driven offer with appropriate contingencies. Negotiate on price or repair credits based on inspection findings. Then, before you list the property, get it rent-ready. Photograph it professionally, write a compelling listing, and screen aggressively before signing any lease. The tax advantages that make rental real estate uniquely powerful. Depreciation, income sheltered by math. The IRS allows you to deduct 1/27.5 of your property's value each year as a depreciation expense, even if the property is appreciating in market value. On a $275,000 rental home, that is roughly $10,000 per year in deductions. Over the 27.5-year depreciation schedule, you shelter $275,000 of income from taxation. The 1031 exchange, indefinitely deferred capital gains. When you sell an investment property for a gain, you owe capital gains tax, up to 20% depending on your income, plus depreciation recapture tax at 25% on the deductions you have claimed over the years. Together, these can consume 40 cents of every dollar of profit. The 1031 Starker exchange sidesteps this entirely. By rolling your proceeds into 1 to 3 like-kind properties within 180 days, you defer the tax indefinitely. Some savvy investors do this repeatedly throughout their lives, upgrading their holdings with every exchange. When they eventually pass those properties to their heirs, the properties receive a stepped-up cost basis, resetting the taxable gain to zero. A strategy that began as tax deferral ends as tax elimination. Deductions. The cost of running a rental business. Every legitimate expense of operating a rental property is deductible. Mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, property management fees, advertising, mileage, and more. Combined with depreciation, these deductions can shelter the entirety of your rental income. The point of all this: I manage 6 residential leases today. When every unit is occupied, the work requires less than an hour a week. The rent checks arrive electronically. The contractors schedule themselves. My tenants, vetted carefully and treated fairly, largely take care of the properties as if they were their own. None of this happened quickly. It was built over more than 20 years of reading, transacting, making mistakes, and refining the system. The Chicago four-plex, with its fire damage and drug dealer history, was the first brick. Each subsequent deal was another. Ecclesiastes 11:2 says to divide your portion among 7 or even 8, because you do not know what disaster may come you. Real estate is one of those portions. Not because it is without risk. Every investment carries risk, but because it combines income, appreciation, leverage, and tax advantages in a way no other common investment does. The question is not whether rental real estate makes sense as part of a wealth-building strategy. It does. The question is whether you are willing to do the patient, deliberate work of building it correctly. Real estate rewards those who think in decades, not weekends. Eugene Han. Chapter 9.